Hi, this is Sigrún with Universal Pagan Temple, and these are the top 10 tips for the beginner in paganism. Now, I compiled this list after, years of talking to new pagans and hearing their questions and what are their most asked questions, because a lot of pagans are coming to this path. And, paganism just isn't one distinct spirituality or religion, but it's a lot of little ones, under the pagan umbrella, and we're going to talk about that. But, if you are a new pagan, welcome to paganism. This is going to be a lot better than what you experienced under the Abrahamic faiths, no matter which Abrahamic faith you came from prior. And I hope you find this video helpful. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. We have lots of links in the description down below for you to check out as well, including books and Patreon, for you to continue to learn. But let's get into tip number 1. Tip number 1 is to understand that paganism is just not one individual spiritual path. Paganism is not one religion or spiritual path, but a broad family of spiritualities. Paganism is an umbrella term for those who do not worship the Abrahamic God, especially those pantheons that we think of that were replaced with Christianity by force or financial coercion, or perhaps even emotional manipulation. A lot of times that still happens. Over the past 2,000 years, Christianity just didn't come into power all at once. No, it took centuries of time, but these pantheons that we think of, the Greek, the Norse, the Celtic, the Egyptian pantheon, whose practices were either eradicated or hidden, that we discovered later on in a period of enlightenment. For this first tip, start by learning the difference between paths like Wicca, that involves magic, or heathenry, that involves worshipping the Norse gods, Hellenic pagans who worship the Greek gods, Celtic pagans who worship the Celtic gods. It takes a while to learn about the different paths. You'll usually want to research pantheons your ancestors worshipped before Christianity was forced upon them. Do lots of research, which leads me to tip number 2. Tip number 2, do your own research and have fun with it. Read reliable sources before joining groups or asking basic questions online. Use libraries and good reputable websites or beginner books to build a foundation. Tip number 3, start with solid beginner books. Now, paganism is not a religion of the people of the book. We don't have a Bible, and we don't, there's not one source of paganism that applies to everybody. We at Universal Pagan Temple, we try to, service a lot of different pagan paths here, and we try to be as knowledgeable as we can in every pagan path, but there are some that we don't know that you might be interested in, and we may be able to guide you to, but there is no, centralized pagan holy book, if that's what you're looking for. So you do have to get started with some books on the subject, and I recommend, if you're going into Wicca, you use the Scott Cunningham Guide for the Solitary Practitioner, or Buckland's called The Big Blue Book by this fans. There's also Paganism, An Introduction to Earth-Centered Religions by Joyce and River Higginbottom. But if you're not interested in those two, you also will want to take a look into various historical sources, or even books on mythology written by historians or people who study mythology for a living, that, if you're wanting to do a more reconstructionist view, And as far as the gods go, you can view the gods in any way that you want to. You can view them as an allegory. You can view them as forces of nature, or you can believe as a hard polytheist where you believe in each god. You don't necessarily have to worship every single god, but you pick a pantheon or even two pantheons. You don't mix the pantheons, by the way. You keep their altars separate, but you honor and worship multiple gods and goddesses of different pantheons, and you acknowledge the existence of every single god and goddess of pagan pantheons, and that's pretty much what I do. But there is a lot to learn, and definitely I suggest reading as much as you can, persist and learn all you can, and you will be the better man or woman, and you will have a pretty good, well-rounded view on paganism. Tip number 4, connect with nature daily. Now this may sound basic, but it is pretty profound. You could just do it by walking in the grass barefoot if the weather permits, or by standing outside, getting outside, walking outside. It's pretty easy, and it is very important, to connect yourself with the energies of the environment that you are in, to realize what season you are in, because Christianity, for example, really disconnects you from nature, and that's the point of Christianity, is to separate you from nature. Therefore, you are separated from the divine. Number 5, learn about the wheel of the year and the cycles of the seasons and the lunar cycles. Familiarize yourself with the 8 Sabbats, like Samhain, Yule, Beltane, that mark seasonal shifts, and not every pantheon will call it, or spiritual path within paganism will call it the wheel of the year. They will call it something else, but you will get more acquainted with these celebrations of the wheel of the year, the cycles and the seasons, as you do step number 4. Now, celebrate simply at first, as you are building your altar to the gods. When you build an altar to the gods, you need to start out simply as well. You may start out with just pictures. You don't have to go out and buy the expensive statues that you see. You could simply just, print out a picture from a website, and get a photo frame, a nice one, and put it, somewhere nice in your home, maybe a bookshelf, or maybe your fireplace. The hearth is a great place. And you put a candle there, and that's where you would give offerings and also decorate for the seasons. And we've got plenty of channels plenty of videos on this channel about decorating your altar for the seasons. Your preferred pantheon might have a variation. Like those who worship the Norse gods would follow a lunar calendar, and a traditional Norse Yule would not be the winter solstice, but it would be the first full moon after the new moon following the winter solstice, usually in January. Or say you're following the Egyptian gods, you're worshiping the Egyptian pantheon. So the wheel of the year would look more like following the ancient Nile River's annual flood cycle, and the phases of the moon, and the rising of Sirius, the dog star. Now, step number 6, I kind of touched upon in step number 5, but this is setting up your special ritual sacred space. This is where you will offer to the gods, do your rituals. And if you get into magic, this is where you will also do that as well, because you will be offering to the gods and the goddesses, asking for their favor while you are doing magic, witchcraft. And this is a space that is supposed to be very important to you. You usually want to put it somewhere where there's not a lot of foot traffic, like, in a hallway. You'll, like I said, perfect place is the fireplace, the hearth, the center of the home. Also, you could put it on a bookshelf, or you could have it in a little corner of the room. I usually suggest people put it in the north, facing north in their home. And that way, you could do ritual facing north. A lot of traditions, they want you to face north. You want to have a simple altar cloth, and keep it clean. Keep your altar space clean, because not only, is it respectful to the gods, it's respectful to yourself. You find that your altar space will reflect your personality more and more as you start to worship. And it doesn't happen all at once. Building an altar takes years, really. You see these big elaborate altars that people post, and just keep in mind that they took several years to build that altar space. It looks beautiful, but a lot of people, it doesn't happen overnight, and you can build over time. It's, Rome wasn't built in a day. Your altar is not going to be built within a day. Number 7, understand that not everyone is accepting of paganism, because unfortunately, once you start to tell people that you are pagan, you are going to get some pushback. You're going to get some aggressive responses, either physically or verbally, depending on who you tell and where you live. Unfortunately, the Abrahamic faiths are not pagan friendly. As a pagan, we may not all be anti-Abrahamic, but remember, all the Abrahamic religions and traditions are anti-paganism. And that's just the long and the short of it. I mean, those individual, Christians may feel, oh, I don't have a problem with paganism, but their religion certainly does. Their faith certainly does have a problem with paganism. So we have to keep that in mind, to, being on this pagan path involves a little bit of, danger, unfortunately. And depending on where you live, if you don't necessarily have freedom of religion, that's also something to take into account. As an American, I am blessed to have freedom of religion, but we have to remember that there are those that would absolutely enjoy taking our freedom of religion away. Even in America, where they would want to say that, oh, well, freedom of religion means freedom for Christians to practice their various denominations in peace. It's not about non-Christians. There are those out there that are actively pushing for that mindset. Number 8, which is practice ethically and safely. And now this is more concerning magic. Now, with number 7, is more practical safety, realizing that the Christians don't necessarily like paganism. Okay. But number 8 is more about magic, and I use Aleister Crowley's definition of magic, where magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. But if you are going to be practicing magic, you need to be aware of the herbs. If you're using herbs, how to use them. You need to make sure that you are not burning any herbs that are, harmful to, inhale, or, if you're going to be ingesting, make sure that they're not going to be harmful to you, or, interact with any medication that you're maybe taking. And then, if you ever see anything like putting a crystal in your mouth to feel its energy, do not do that. I have seen these some of these new agers suggest to do that, and even if it's a tumbled crystal, where it's smooth all around, you don't want to be doing that, because some of these crystals, they dissolve when they touch liquid, and some of them are kind of hazardous. Not kind of, they are. So you definitely don't want to do something as stupid as that. You want to use common sense and, double check with what you're doing, and then, just practice safety. Tip number 9 is find a community. But there is some warnings to this. You want to make sure to avoid any kind of cult-like behaviors. You can look into online forums, local meetups, an open event once you feel confident enough. Observe them before committing. And healthy groups really encourage questioning and, exploration. And, as far as cult-like behavior, be aware of that. Look up what makes a cult, such as absolute authoritarianism without accountability, and zero tolerance for criticism or questions, or, demonizing former members. You want to kind of do your research on these groups if you're going to join them. You can do that nowadays more easily than you could when I started in paganism, because a lot of people, they do talk online about pagan groups. But tip number 9 is be patient with yourself. And this kind of works into what I was talking about earlier about altars. But as far as being patient with yourself, there's a lot to learn about paganism. Whether you decide, oh, I'm going to go into Wicca first and then explore other paths, that's fine. Or I'm just going to go straight into, Hellenic paganism or Norse paganism. There's a whole lot to learn, and don't, get down on yourself about not knowing as much as somebody else does. And, with anything, there's jerks everywhere, and you just have to realize that a lot of these people have a lot of pent up frustrations, perhaps from personal life, or, kept over from Christianity. I've noticed that a lot, where they didn't release the anger that they had towards Christianity, and so they still kind of behave like Christians. And that's not healthy either. But as long as you're, aware and, be patient with other people and be patient with yourself, you're going to have a much better time. But if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And until next time, blessed be.